Thank you for joining me for another video. This time, everything you need to know for a trip to Sri Lanka. If you haven't already, then I recommend you watch our Sri Lanka and the Maldives itinerary video, which I'll link to at the end. You can check out our 2-week itinerary, including where to go and where to stay. I want this video to be useful into the future, and so I'm not going to focus on COVID requirements, which will probably just change anyway. I'm going to focus on the 4 following topics: preparing to travel to Sri Lanka, including everything you need to know about foreign currency; what to expect whilst you're in Sri Lanka, including cultural elements such as suggestions for tipping; getting around, including how to find a driver; and finally, what to do, including places to visit and everything you need to know about safaris. So you're excited to head to Sri Lanka. But just before you head to the airport, there's a few things that you need to know. Firstly, and quite simply, you're going to need a 3-pronged Indian style adapter for any electronics. I'll go ahead and link to the one that we purchased for our electronics in the description below. While you're at it, you're going to want a really good mosquito repellent. Again, I'll link to that in the description below if you need it. Apart from the obvious things like needing a really good quality sun cream, that's probably all you're going to need to pack with you specifically from home. On the other hand, something you shouldn't bring with you is a drone. I actually purchased a drone just before we headed to Sri Lanka. However, when I started to go through the process of getting my drone approved, it's a lot of work, including approval from the aviation authorities, from the Sri Lankan MOD, and you also need some approval from the areas in which you're going to fly the drone, which can actually sometimes include a payment. You can easily Google multiple reports of people being fined heavily for bringing their drone to Sri Lanka without a license, so just don't do it, leave it at home. Now onto the topic of currency. Sri Lankan currency is known as the Sri Lankan rupee, and the acronym is LKR. That's important for a tip that I'm going to tell you in a minute. Although the exchange rate is very favourable to Western currencies, it's actually a closed currency, which means you can only get Sri Lankan rupee in Sri Lanka. So in order to get hold of the currency, you're going to either need to bring with you cash in the form of euros, UK pounds or US dollars, or you can bring a travel card. I used a Monzo in order to pull money out of local cash machines. We actually found that a lot of businesses were happy to accept UK pounds, and we also hear it's really easy to pay in euros and US dollars as well if you want to. The thing that we did find quite difficult when we were pulling money out of cash points was that it came in 5,000 rupee increments, which was something around £20 at the time. The issue with this is that 5,000 rupees is roughly enough for 2 people to have a nice dinner. So if you're buying something small, a lot of businesses don't want to have to try and give you the change. This led to the issue with us not really having very much small change, which made it really difficult to pay tuk-tuk drivers and similar vendors. Now, a really good little tip for you, if you have an iPhone and you're looking to find out what the current exchange rate is from Sri Lankan rupee to your home currency, go to the home page on your iPhone, scroll down so that you get the little search box come up. Type in the number that you want to convert, for example 5,000, and then put that acronym that I was explaining to you earlier, which is LKR, and it will show you exactly what the Sri Lankan rupee equivalent is. Now, touching on what you can expect when you get here in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has an extremely rich culture, which has been influenced by the general subcontinent of India and also surrounding regions over time, as well as, of course, colonial rule and the colourful breadth of religion. The predominant religion in Sri Lanka is Buddhism. A word of advice here would be that you never take a photo of a religious artifact with your back to it. Also, if you're planning to visit a temple, covering your shoulders and wearing respectful clothing is a must. Something you probably will notice if you're visiting from a Western country such as the UK or the US is the much more relaxed way of life. This is of course a great thing, but something you might notice is that service might take a little bit longer than you'd expect it to back home. For example, your waiter may take a little bit longer to come to your table and serve you. For me, this was a great opportunity to unwind and relax into the experience. Besides, what's the rush? On the topic of service comes the obvious question around tipping culture. Here in Sri Lanka, A 10% service charge is usually added to your bill at the end. However, from my experience, I would typically add an additional 10% to ensure that the person that served you gets this tip. This is a hotly debated topic, but if you don't take my previous advice, then simply tip when you feel like you had good service. Now, I did mention in the first part of this video, but if it isn't extremely obvious, Sri Lanka is a hot country. Even when it isn't perfectly sunny, it's still probably worth wearing a high sun factor sun cream. We had some days where it was completely overcast and I still found myself feeling as if I'd been sunbathing in full sun. Sri Lanka is an incredible island with so much to see. So how do you get around? Well, we used a small independent agency to book the drivers for the majority of our trips, especially where we were changing locations. I'll link to them in the description. They were very helpful and all of the communication went through Facebook Messenger, which was super helpful for me. For reference, it cost us around $75 a day, which is around £50. This will give you a driver in a nice spacious car with air conditioning, which is a must, and will also include everything such as food, tolls, and the driver's accommodation if they're staying far away from their home. We actually ended up taking a different driver for each of our trips. That was mainly because we were staying in a specific location for 1 or 2 days, so we didn't need the driver to wait. And for some of the smaller trips that we did that didn't require a driver for a whole day, we would just ask what the cost was for that specific trip. At each of the places that we stayed at, we typically used the hotel's own tuk-tuk service, or we used PickMe, which is the equivalent of Uber. Uber is available in Sri Lanka, but we found it really inconsistent and a lot of the drivers actually ended up cancelling on us. There are so many amazing things to do and places to visit in Sri Lanka that would probably take a whole video for me to go through. I'll probably put one of those together in the future, so if you'd like me to do that, comment below and let me know. However, in general, I would recommend that you immerse yourself in the Sri Lankan way of life. This would include a visit to a holy site, such as a temple, or in our case, we visited Sigiriya. Sigiriya, although not technically a holy site, is considered the 8th wonder of the world and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's definitely worth a visit. I actually recorded the entire climb, and I'll link to that in the description below. Another very popular site is the central temples within Kandy, which houses the Temple of the Sacred Tooth. When we went, a religious event was happening, so it was almost impossible to get in. However, walking around the lake next door and taking the views from the outside was really nice. Another recommendation that I would make is to visit a national park and go on a safari. I personally really liked Yala National Park, where we were able to see many amazing animals in their natural habitat. There are a number of options available to you when it comes to going on safari. Firstly, you could turn up early in the morning and grab yourself a driver. Typically, there are a number of drivers available as they hang around outside some of the major hotels near Yala. You could also book a safari through your hotel, or you could do what we did, which was to book a specialist guide and driver. This will cost you a little bit more, but it's absolutely worth it. Having someone that's able to point out amazing animals that you would have had no chance of seeing without knowing where to look, but also being taught all about those amazing animals really did make it an amazing safari experience. I will link to the business that we used in the description below. The other thing that you need to take into account is the ticket price. There is a ticket system which is independent of the drivers, which you will need to pay unless it's included within your package. I believe it's around $30 per person, so it's worth finding out if this is included. For us, it was. So this video is running a little bit long, so I'll end it there. However, if you do have any questions or you want me to make a separate video diving into some specific details, please comment that below. If you've made it this far and you found this useful, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you and see you next time.